Welcome to the session. We're going to talk about web access management here and how we can connect Okta to the legacy on-premise applications without doing a lot of retrofitting of your applications. Welcome, and I appreciate all your comments after and between the sessions as well. My name is Sandeep Kumbhat. I'm a Master Principal Solutions Architect with Okta. I'll be joined by Ahuja, a Senior Services Architect with Okta Professional Services, as well as with a couple of folks from Hitachi, Anurag and Ranjeet, who lead the IT for Hitachi Vantara. Quick look at the agenda. We're going to talk about how did we used to secure applications then, and how do we secure it now, and why do we do it like that. I'll show you a quick demonstration of a couple of ways to look at how to modernize your applications, as well as how to move your applications from legacy stack to the modern and agent-less stacks. Cam is going to come up and talk about customer deployment trends, what he has seen in the industry, what are the best practices to plan out the strategy for moving off the legacy WAM technologies, be it SiteMinder or Oracle Access Managers. And then Hitachi is going to share their case study as how they moved away from Oracle Access Manager deployment, which was deployed from a decade or so, and now they are on Okta. Let's look at a quick scenario. Let's rewind like 20 years back. How did we used to secure applications? How did we used to give access to applications to the end user? Let's say there was a user who wanted to get access to an employee portal. They used to browse to a site if it was web-enabled, and they used to get access to the application. At this particular juncture, the user has not authenticated. They were just getting some information off the website itself. In order for the application to know about the user, there needed to be something which was intercepting the application access itself and redirecting it to something which identifies the user. That's where the WAM policy servers came into existence. So you used to author the policies over there. Hey, the user can access this application, not that application. They will have a group-based access. They will have a rule-based access. All those policies used to go into those policy servers like SiteMinders or Oracles or ForgeRocks of the world. How did you use to store those policies? It had a policy backend, a database. So you used to store those policies over there, replicate over to different data centers and different nodes, and that's where you actually made it highly available. So a lot of infrastructure over there by this itself. And then users, they were getting stored in directories like Active Directories of the world, LDAPs of the world, and you were replicating those directories as well. So you can already see, just to protect a very simple application, you had to stood up a lot of architecture and infrastructure to protect that particular application A. Now, in order for application A to reach out to the policy server, there was a web agent which was deployed on the web server. So as soon as the web server used to boot up, it used to read that configuration file from the web server. Hey, you know what? I need to go to that policy server and see how do I authenticate this user. The policy server used to give a policy back that, you know what, give a login page, authenticate this user, and once you get the user context from the user directory, pass on the user context as HTTP headers. That was the default or de facto way of passing on the user subject details to the downstream application. And it used to continue for every application you used to onboard. You onboard a second application, be it application B, let's say web server B, it could be IAS, Apaches of the world, Oracle HTTP servers. You used to protect it with a very specific web agent which was given out by the policy servers. Application C, your developers wanted to build their own application within the network, and they used to use the Java or the .NET APIs which the policy server used to give out, and they used to code those applications with those policy servers very tightly coupled. So you can see how much dependency you used to actually build on top of these policy servers itself with the very proprietary APIs given out by these policy servers as well. Fast forward 10 years, and like 10 years before this, bring in application D, which was federation enabled. Federation means you have a service provider and you have an identity provider, and you used to federate those applications with a common protocol, be it SAML or WS federation. Most of the cases, your legacy policy server never used to talk federation. You upgraded those policy servers, or you brought in a new federation identity provider, and you started stitching those policy servers together. And if you were lucky, the same vendor provided the federation identity provider, you renewed those licenses, and you were now having all those green boxes being built as a mega legacy identity infrastructure within your system. Now, the SAML problem was solved. Fast forward 5 years, you brought in a single page app. How do I secure a single page app? I need a little bit context, but it's not a server-side app. So how do I do that? So you used to pass securely OpenID Connect or authorized tokens from an authorization server. Of course, your federation identity provider was not geared up to actually give those functionalities or tokens, so you brought in another authorization server. Similarly, if you brought in a mobile app, you had to have a gateway for inbound and outbound communication, and that gateway needed to talk to an authorization server. So you already see there is a huge mess going on in the legacy infrastructure, and you had to, you had an urge to actually simplify it, but you did not know how to actually get there. Now, with businesses evolving, you wanted to get to the microservices architecture. You brought in a lot of resource servers, and those resource servers were giving out some data to your legacy applications as well, and you had to kind of cobble all of these services together to form the user context. So already this landscape looks pretty complicated. Comes cloud applications. You started hosting your applications in the cloud, be it PaaS environments like all the cloud environments like Azure, AWS, GCP, or Oracle, and then you got in SaaS applications as well. Now, how do I connect to those worlds? I have solved everything below the firewall. Above the firewall, I need to take care of a lot of network security aspects. And you discovered that, you know what, technologies like Okta, they have solved this. Let's get Okta, let's solve this. But what you have done to your infrastructure, you have a huge complexity to deal with, a lot of places where the policies are stored. And smart folks like you have discovered that, you know what, Okta has done it beautifully for my cloud applications. Why can't I actually just put all my applications under Okta itself? Be it a common login page between my WAM policy server and federation servers and Okta, or just a bookmark. But that bookmark and those common login pages are not solving the underlying issue, which is the complexity underneath. You want to simplify that. You may be ending up having like thousands and thousands of web agents which are deployed in your architecture. I go to a lot of customers and they say that, we don't even know how many web agents we have deployed. So auditability for those web agents is a big problem. And for your access infrastructure, it's not acceptable. Smart folks like you are going to think about, why can't I just dissolve this entire architecture of all the green boxes and bring in a very simplistic view where I still have a user directory to go to on-premise. So Okta has that connectivity solved with AD agents or LDAP agents. And all my on-premise apps, they want to accept few of the ways to authenticate a user. It could be a way to actually pass on HTTP headers. So how do I pass those? So with our integrations with leading reverse proxies and gateways, be it F5, Akamai's of the world, Cloudflare's of the world, we can connect to those reverse proxies which could be sitting in your DMZ, pass on a federated token, be it SAML or OpenID Connect, and those gateways can pass on the HTTP headers to the downstream on-premise applications. What you have solved over here is two things: network connectivity to your on-premise applications from an Okta perspective, and the second thing is you are passing the legacy headers and tokens without retrofitting your applications at all. So it's maintaining status quo. At the same time, it's giving you a single line of control for all your on-premise as well as cloud applications. Isn't that simple enough? We're going to show that in the demonstration as well. With respect to federation applications, Okta already talks natively all those federation protocols. Can I just find a way for Okta to just connect to those on-premise apps using a gateway or an on-premise reverse proxy and just get the federation going? That's also solved then. And the third piece is resource servers and microservices which your businesses have produced in different business units, and leverage those data-based microservices and funnel that out from an Okta authorization-based OAuth tokens. So you have covered both your worlds where you have the HTTP header-based applications, federation-based applications, as well as the microservices authenticating. What if you wanted to actually retire, or essentially, the question which comes up often is, you have gotten rid of the web agents. How, if I go directly to my on-prem app, would it actually recognize that I need to authenticate from Okta, or does it always need to go through a reverse proxy? That's where, kind of best practices like mutual TLS comes into picture. So a user who tries to go directly to an on-prem app, they will be automatically redirected to a reverse proxy using a mutual SSL handshake, or mutual TLS as we call it. And that's where you're securing both native application as well as at the reverse proxy tier. The other question which I get asked is, can I retire more from my on-premise infrastructure perspective? That's where Okta has introduced now an LDAP interface on top of Okta. So your applications which were coded directly to go against an on-prem LDAP, They can go to Okta, and Okta can connect to the rest of the data repositories which you have it out there. Question also gets asked, what about my custom apps? I built it using the custom agent SDKs. That's where Okta's REST APIs come into picture, and you can build it directly off Okta's REST APIs and SDKs rather than building using those native and legacy Java or .NET APIs. So this is a much simplistic infrastructure as compared to what you have been used to from a WAM infrastructure perspective. Let's look at a quick demonstration. This is one of the apps which is accepting HTTP headers, and I'm going to go directly access this app once. You're going to see that it doesn't have any user context. Then I'm going to introduce an Nginx, simple Nginx gateway, which is going to connect to Okta using OpenID Connect, and then take the OpenID Connect tokens and claims and pass it over to the downstream application using HTTP headers. So let's see that configuration in action. I'm going to access the downstream map, and you're going to see that when I access this, you don't see any user-specific content in there, right? But it's passing HTTP headers from the user agent. Now I'm going to go and access this using an Nginx reverse proxy sitting in front of it, and it asks for Okta authentication. Now this is talking to Okta using OpenID Connect. So once I authenticate into this reverse proxy, this is going to pass all the HTTP headers which the app requires without even changing any of the application backend. Simple enough. Let's see how it works. I'm onboarding an Nginx client on Okta side. So simple authorized code flow from an OpenID Connect perspective. I'm going to get a client ID and a secret, which I need to configure within the Nginx gateway. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to assign it to the users, how I typically assign from a policy server standpoint. The user is assigned, and I'm also going to configure some group-based claim policies within Okta itself. So once I have that nailed down, I'll go to the Nginx configuration file, similar to httpd.conf file, which you used to have in web servers. I'm going to configure it to use Okta's OpenID Connect library for Nginx. I'm going to configure the client ID secret, which I configured on Okta's side, connect Okta and the Nginx gateway, and then set headers into the downstream application, which it needs to pass claims to. That's it. Your application is now accepting OpenID Connect-based JOT claims, which is being passed on over as headers. And it's a matter of 5 minutes you should be able to configure this with Okta and Nginx together. Simple enough? Few of the folks are going to be asking, okay, I'm very used to configuring URL level access policies. Where do my policies go? In the Nginx example which you showed me, there were no policies. So yeah, you would be having URL-based access resources, //secure, /admin, /portal. I want to have a separate policy for all of these different URL contexts. So the reverse proxies which I was talking about, all of these reverse proxies have some way of configuring these policies out there. I'm going to take an example and show you a similar reverse proxy built on Nginx called SP Gateway, and that has this whole policy administration console and administration point, which is going to let you author these policies inside. It's a quick example of that. The gateway which I have over here has a soft appliance which could be deployed on-premise in your environment, or you could deploy it on a cloud network as well. So once my appliance is stood up, I'm going to go ahead and connect Okta and the appliance together. So I'm creating an Okta API token, and this token would be stored within the gateway. So the gateway can onboard the application synchronously from a gateway perspective and Okta perspective. You don't need to onboard in two different places. I'm logging into the gateway now, and the gateway has a notion of site topology and identity providers. The identity provider we are going to configure over here is Okta. So I'm going to go into the identity provider section, onboard Okta, and configure all of my gateway details with respect to Okta domain details. So I'm configuring my tenant over here. The token which I just created on Okta side, I'm going to validate on the gateway side that it can talk to it. It validated it. And I'm going to give a quick description to identify if there are multiple Okta domains out there. And click OK. Now this IDP is connected to the reverse proxy. And now I'm going to onboard a sample application. The first application which I'm going to onboard is going to be a no-auth application. By the way, if you look at the type of applications you can onboard, Oracle E-Business Suite, PeopleSoft, all of those applications is also something which you can configure in the gateway. In this example, I'm configuring a no-auth or unprotected pages, but it's going to still pass through the gateway. In order for me to configure that, I'm going to give a public domain and a protected web resource internal domain. So this public domain is going to be what you're going to be accessing from external access standpoint, and internally, where does the proxy route the traffic to? That's where it's going. I'm going to assign it to Okta groups. Those groups get pulled out from using an Okta API calls and through the Okta API token. I'm going to configure that, access this application which I onboarded in a few minutes, and you're going to see that I can access this application using the gateway. So no header information yet, no user context yet. Now I'm going to onboard a header-based application out here, and this header-based application is going to have the user context. So we now need to connect the user information, the user headers needs to be passed over to the application itself. So I'm going to onboard a header-based application. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to configure the same configuration where there's a public domain and a protected web resource domain. I'm going to deliberately skip the group assignment over here, which is going to be assigned to a specific group of people. So I'm going to skip that and see how the access gets routed based on no groups being able to access right now. I'm going to go to the attributes section, which is the second step of the application wizard. And I see that the SP Gateway username is being passed over as a session attribute. I'm going to put in more attributes over here, like login attribute, and just for the interest of time, I'm going to onboard a few more like first name, last name, some phone extensions, and a title. Once I do that, now my application is configured to pass those headers from Okta once it gets those, and this application has been simultaneously onboarded on Okta. The error which you saw was, hey, you didn't assign any groups to this user, so we're going to go back to the application. Here, the list of groups is being pulled out directly from Okta's groups APIs. I'm assigning it now to everyone group. And now when I access this application, this is pulling in all the user-specific headers and passing it over to the application. Now, very similar to the Nginx on-premise gateway, which I showed you, but this is where you can author your own policies as an app administrator rather than putting it directly into the files. Alrighty. Okay. Sandeep, you still haven't answered my question. Where do I make those URL level authorization policies? Can I go coarse-grained, fine-grained? This is where the policy side of the gateway comes into picture. Here, I would configure some context URLs. So there'll be an unprotected URL, which I showed you before. There'll be a secure URL over here, where everyone can access this /secure URL endpoint. And for the /admin endpoint, I'm going to have just an app admin group of people who can access this. If you look at the other group policies, I can deny a group, I can do a whitelisting or blacklisting of group, remote IPs who are authorized to access this application, logical combination of groups which can access this app, a specific user, or other regex operations which you might want to configure as a fine-grained authorization policy for this application. So pretty flexible from that perspective. I'm going to finish onboarding this application. I'm going to go to Okta and I'm going to show you that the user Sandeep doesn't have an app admin group, so he should be denied while he accesses the /admin end page. So I'm into the secure endpoint, and secure endpoint basically is protected by the reverse proxy. Reverse proxy redirects to Okta for authentication. Once I authenticate, I can get inside the application, and you can see all the headers which I'm passing in for this application over here. All the headers are over here. But when I go to the /admin page, the access gets denied. And the reason the access got denied, because I did not have the app admin group. So all the group level authorization policies are active over here. What you saw over here was a very, very simple way to actually migrate your on-premise application protected by the SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager and put it onto a architecture like a reverse proxy. Obvious advantages, you're not deploying thousands of web agents. So it simplifies your infrastructure, your operations, your patching significantly for those backend systems without even changing the apps. The other thing which you are doing over here is you are gearing up your application to be modernized. So how do you modernize your application? The question comes up, okay, I have a status quo, I have decommissioned my WAM server, but I have certain apps which I do not want to put behind reverse proxy. They're moving to the cloud, or some app administrators are motivated enough to modernize those. So Okta has a very comprehensive application modernization strategy where you can modernize your application deployed directly onto these app servers like Oracle's, IBM's of the world, JBoss, or Apache and .NET. So they will federate directly with Okta. If you have web servers like Nginx, which I just showed you as an example of, you have web server like .NET, which is IIS, or Java, or other flavors of Apache. You can protect those with out-of-the-box Okta modernization toolkits. And the custom apps, where you were using the custom agent SDK, and I was talking about the REST APIs, which you can leverage. If you want to have platform-specific web SDKs, Okta has tens and 20s of these web SDKs built for platforms like PHP, if you have Angular, Vue, any of the modern web interfaces you're building, you don't need to code authentication from scratch onto it. You can leverage Okta's web SDKs and start using Okta's authentication in a matter of minutes. So that'll accelerate your modernization and move off the WAM strategy altogether. How did we get there? We had a strategy. So WAM migration always is going to be a journey, but strategy comes first. You need to identify which applications you're going to move off and how you're going to move off. You need to classify, these are my federated apps, these are my non-federated apps, and then you need to begin planning out your rollout. And in order for us to get to the strategy part and explain how the strategy works in action, let me invite Cam Ahuja. He's going to talk about a few of the customer examples where we did migrate those applications in an automated and semi-automated way. Cam?
Thanks, Sandeep. It's awesome demos. Hi, everyone. So as Sandeep mentioned, I'm on the professional services team, and I really help customers go through this migration that kind of Sandeep described. I worked with Hitachi over the last year going through their journey with Okta. And really, I would say, the key to success is defining the strategy early on, because as you look at your on-prem applications or cloud-based applications as you have today, it seems like a daunting task. You have, hundreds, thousands of apps. How do you go about modernizing them and then kind of migrating them over? So strategy is key. So, when we work at Hitachi, same approach we used. I want to share that with you guys. So as you are thinking about this, you can leverage the strategy. I'm just going to explain it here. So you want to look at your list of applications that you have, try to categorize them in essentially two different large buckets. One is the apps that do support modern auth, SAML, OIDC, even WS-Fed. In those cases, you can integrate them using our OIN or using our application wizards. Very straightforward. Those are the easy ones. Then you have the scenario of the ones that don't, right? So you have legacy applications, maybe custom applications that use header-based auth. One approach is you can upgrade them to a version that does support it. So that's ideal. If you can go from an older version that doesn't support it and then to a newer version that does support SAML, that's ideal. But there's always scenarios where you can. It's some old application that you don't have any plans of migrating, or they just are custom built and they just core to the business and there's no plans to migrate them. That's where the solutions that we kind of going through are helpful. We classify those apps, migrate them, using one of the options Sandeep shared, and over time, that's usually a slower migration. There's essentially like a whole program management aspect that's important to it, key to it, to kind of getting off of those. And Ranjeet will share that from Hitachi, kind of what our approach was. How does that look like over in a span of 12 to 18 months? That's your, gets you to your end state of sunsetting your legacy WAM solutions, right? Your mission accomplished. And the benefits, again, looking at all these applications, it may feel like it's something you have to do, all in one go. It's definitely not the case. So as you kind of take, different paths here, the benefits start, coming a lot sooner. So as soon as you start migrating these apps into Okta, you don't have to have, maybe you have a large team today, that's supporting these products that can start, they can start focusing on other things, or, supporting apps with Okta, onboarding new apps. So there's cost savings there, time saving, agility to be able to onboard new apps a lot more easier than you probably have done in the past. Customer experience is very standard. Everything we're doing at Okta, the users are expecting that with other apps, so you don't have to train them. A lot less overhead for support. And, the beauty of all of this really is, if you're looking at doing adaptive MFA or MFA or any kind of advanced, access management, you can do that very easily by applying MFA policies straight on top of these applications. And if your goal is to kind of get to that zero trust nirvana, it gets you there a lot faster. So everything I'm kind of sharing here, we have documented it, the approach, the strategy. There's a couple of white papers that are really good for this. So if this is something you're looking at, highly recommend reading these. It's really kind of combining years of what we are seeing in the field into a couple of white papers, and you can use this as a discussion with your team you're working with at Okta. This migration white paper it kind of discusses the entire flow at a high level. You see kind of the diagram. It's very similar to what Sandeep presented in one of his slides earlier. And then there's one that goes in a little bit more detail on modernizing the apps. So if you have that scenario and you are thinking about migrating these apps or maybe switching over to OIDC, this will address that in a little bit more detail. So the trends, as we kind of do this for many customers, there's certainly trends that we see, B2C and B2E world. That's kind of how I differentiate them. Okta, we refer to them as your workforce and your customer identities. So in workforce, the drivers are usually security. Maybe the company went through an audit, and the security team will lead an initiative to bring Okta in, do things like bring in MFA, and it's very security driven. They want to try to get this, going with the standardized approach. So if they want to move from Okta to a different product or integrate with their systems, it's very, very easy to do so. Nothing you're doing here is, custom for Okta. It's all open standards. Agility being, the item I mentioned earlier. So if you're integrating with other cloud-based solutions, SaaS products, very easy to integrate because, you can use our wizard or you can use one of our pre-built connectors in the Okta integration network. Customer identity, it's, agility also again plays a role. User experience is usually one of the key factors. I'll share a story with you about another customer. I like the story. It's a little bit interesting because they are, doing WAM migration with, in the B2C use case, millions of users. And their key driver was user experience. So they want to have lower latency. They want faster response times. And they have really a complex solution that they want to migrate off of. It's an LDAP that's built up over the last 15 years and a very customized site-minded deployment. So there for them, it was user experience and performance that was the driver. As we can work with customers on these, they get an opportunity to kind of evaluate their application portfolio. So a lot of them will actually use it as an opportunity to switch to different products altogether that may be the best of breed today. So do kind of consider that as you're looking at your current application landscape. Upgrading to modern auth standard is definitely kind of the common theme that we see. Wherever you can, customers prefer to actually migrate off of the old header-based solutions or Kerberos to modern auth. Just gives them a lot more flexibility moving forward. WAM integration with Okta, that's exactly what Hitachi did. So you'll hear a little bit more about that there and modern auth enable apps. In this case, I was just kind of mentioning, this is B2C. This customer has a mobile app and a web app. The mobile app is hosted, this is their existing state, so before they migrated to Okta, it's basically sitting on top of a mobile backend as a service solutions, MemBaz, and their web-facing solution is sitting on Force.com, Salesforce. So what they had previously was, these two kind of cloud-based systems, and on the back end, they have their documents, kind of their policies that are being stored on products like IBM FileNet, and they are secured using SiteMinder web agents. So you kind of see that on the right side, IBM FileNet, and then there's a couple other applications that they've built out, as part of their business over the last few years. They have the WAM policy server, policy store, the usual suspects, and then they have the ADLDS dashboard where the user settings about 4 million identities, so a pretty large deployment, and really kind of, it's just kind of come about over the last 10, 15 years. So they're really looking to kind of clean up this design as much as they can. And then for their backend, they had, MuleSoft APIs. So we went from existing to interim state, where we introduced Okta. Okay, perfect. The interim state, you'll see, kind of the approach we took here is to federate the mobile app and the web app, which is sitting on Salesforce, with our identity cloud. So they were configured as, SAML and OAuth clients. And on the back end, they took a phased approach, so they couldn't, move off of FileNet. so that we left the SiteMinder web agents in there in the interim state so they can continue to keep that integration in place while also, looking at using F5's Access Policy Manager for the SAML brokering, a really good alternative to, come up with some of the options Sandeep shared. So in this case, they had F5 in place, so it really made it easy for them to do so. But really, in this case, you can use an F5 APM, NetScaler, IC Synergies, SP Gateway, all really good options. And then MuleSoft stayed the same, no kind of difference there. They integrated Okta with their LDS using, our LDAP agent to bring the users in and then go through a slow password migration. Their final state was, kind of sunsetting their SiteMinder deployment. In this case, switching over to a custom solution that does the SAML brokering between FileNet and Okta. That's the big difference there, and you kind of see the LDAP, it can be sunset, once they're able to put that in place. So really, really simple deployment with this. Now they have ability to kind of integrate with different products on the back end if they want to move off of FileNet to a different service. The cloud-based solution, very easy to do so because that would just integrate with Okta, and they'll be able to pass in, custom scoped access tokens as needed to pull those documents down rather than having that hosted on their on-prem with, FileNet and other custom apps. So, keep this in mind as you're thinking about your solutions, and, the key being, as much as you can, try to migrate off of, your old systems to modern auth. It's usually there's that upfront cost, but the beauty of it is, as you are integrating with our systems, it's very easy to do so. It's not customized. So the approach we kind of follow, for going through these projects, there's really kind of four big pillars there. Learn, going through the training. So we did work with Hitachi early on to make sure that our entire team was trained. There's a large team that supports existing solutions. So make sure, they are kind of learning about Okta as we get into design. So they come to the workshops with really good questions because they understand the product's capabilities, just to now get into specific solutioning for them. So start off with training if you can. Very, very helpful. Then we get into deployment, which is designing and deploying these solutions. Getting the customers live, getting you guys live, up and running, adoption. So you'll, commonly have CSMs who work with you to make sure all your apps that you want to go live with on Okta, you're able to do so. And, if there's any hurdles, they kind of help work through that. And last but not least, grow. So once you kind of have this set up, following this model, you'll see you have a team that actually is now aware of Okta's capabilities, and they can now onboard more apps by themselves without really kind of needing an assistance. It's a very easy, repeatable model. So let me introduce, my fellow team members from Hitachi team to kind of come and share their journey and kind of, what it was like for them to deploy Okta in their environment. Anurag?
Thanks, Cam. My name's Anurag. I'm from Hitachi Vantara IT, and I wish our apps got deployed as fast as they were shown over here. So you must be familiar with Hitachi. It's a global company, has over 900 subsidiaries, and it's been in business for over 100 years. Has a very strong culture of attracting the best people to work for it. And specific to Hitachi Vantara, which is one of the Hitachi subsidiaries, we have about 7,000 employees. It's about 4,000 to 5,000 more contractors that work with us. We work in over 100 countries, and we have over 10,000 customers. Our business is mainly in storage, but diversifying into IoT and services. So we started our journey to move to a modern IDM system about a year back. And we have over 50,000 users of our IDM system and over 125 apps. We have all kinds. We are modernizing and moving to cloud, but still have quite a few on-prem apps as well. So Ranjeet here will talk about all the technologies we used, but the primary driver for us was really to the speed of execution. Not just for the project itself of migrating to Okta, but going forward as we bring in new applications into our portfolio, how quickly we can set them up on the new IDM system. Technology, some of those that we use our MuleSoft for our middleware, and we use SP Gateway to connect to some of our on-prem systems. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Ranjeet to go over the architecture of how we went about it, how we phased the different applications, what our roadmap looked like, and some of the challenges we faced and learnings we had as we went through the execution of the project. Ranjeet?
Guys, good afternoon. So this is about IAM of Hitachi. Like we are doing typically that everyone do from IAM perspective, like directory service, authentication, desktop single sign-on, providing self-service to our customer partner to register, provisioning, and reports and audits. And with this, we had a legacy system, both employee and contractor, which are internal users and also external. This is how it was looking for our internal users, where employees, contractors, after onboarding, they're flowing down to identity management system. And then identity management system is taking care of provisioning to on-prem applications, also to cloud applications, and directories. And then we had an access manager and multiple web agents, which were taking care of single sign-on. We had like all kind of protocols, WAM, OAuth, and SAML. Similarly, for customer partners, again, there were IAM system, which was providing self-registration. We had some portal where customer can log, anyone can go and log into Hitachi, subscribe for some of our application, public applications. And depend on your like role with the company, you can get some additional access. So this was again managed by our legacy IAM system in terms of provisioning and single sign-on. Challenges, as like Sandeep highlighted earlier, cost of integration, obviously, multiple tools we were managing to manage these IAM functions. We had like any new open standard, we need to look forward like to vendor to see like if it is supported or not. So that was a challenge. Maintenance, infra cost, there are multiple challenges like any legacy system has. So we decided to move to Okta, and with Okta, like one of the key objectives was like keeping this seamless for customers and our users, whoever is using IAM system, they should not know that something is being changed or there shouldn't be any impact on them. So we did it in multiple phases. There's one of the key state, which was kind of called interim state, where we had coexistence of our legacy IAM system and new IAM system, which is Okta. So they work together. The authentication was being done by our legacy IAM system, where SAML or JWT or whatever tokens were being generated, it was being generated by Okta. And then once this foundation was ready, set up, we started migrating more applications to the new IAM system. And this continued, and then we went to the final state, where we completely replaced our legacy system. And now Okta is taking care of identity and provisioning as well. Again, like for WAM integration, we used SP Gateway, and some of the WAM, if possible, we change it to SAML or OAuth. Also for all SAML was already taken care. For provisioning, there were some challenges, like wherever scheme is supported or Okta has out-of-box connector, we used Okta connector, else we used MuleSoft as middleware to call APIs of the application and manage the life cycle of the user. And like this is how we run the program. We did classify all the work modules or work stream of the project in advance. So like we set up the foundation first, then all the simplest SAML SSO, we started migrating first. Then we did take care of remaining non-SAML apps, that includes WAM. We did impersonation. Our CSRs use impersonation application to impersonate customers' behavior, and also the custom login page. So that was a separate work stream. Org2Org, since Hitachi has multiple companies, Ashish mentioned today morning in keynotes. So we have Org2Org connectivity between them. So that was taken care of. Registration and self-service was taken care of later with help of MuleSoft and Adobe framework, and also employee onboarding and provisioning. So overall, I think the migrating application started in March last year, and by now we complete this program. And this is one of the testimony. I think we deployed last. When we did a major deployment, 44 applications went on the single deployment day, so that's testimony. That's pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjeet. Just wanted to go back and talk about the cutover email. Thank you. This was the kind of conclusion of all the migration efforts which we have had with the reverse proxy technology we're talking about. The email was sent by Arvind from Hitachi Vantara, the program manager, talking about the success of the migration. If you look at all the apps on the right side, these are all the apps which were cut over on a single weekend. So all the 44 apps which you see out there, including Oracle E-Business Suite, all were migrated off to Okta and the SP Gateway combination, and quite a few other complex use cases which were not even actually accomplished using the WAM server, which is Oracle Access Manager in this particular case. We accomplished using Okta's APIs. So big round of applause for Hitachi. Thank you for embarking on this journey. And with that, I would like to open it up for any questions if you might have.
Yesterday there was a product announcement on Okta Access Gateway. I just want to understand if there's any relation to what we discussed today.
Absolutely. Very good question. Okta Access Gateway announced at the keynote yesterday. Definitely it's in relation with this. Very similar technologies out there from an Okta Access Gateway perspective as well. It's still very early from sharing any kind of a detail on Okta Access Gateway, but this will actually be exactly on the similar lines of what we have showed today.
Hi, question for Hitachi. Have you quantified how much support costs and software license you were able to deprecate by moving to Okta from the legacy systems?
Yeah, we did actually. There was a pretty big workshop was done to quantify the effort and like how it is going to cost in the next 5 years. So that evaluation was done. And it was not, like the cost was definitely one of the reasons we moved, but there were multiple, like we had a vision where we are sharing the service within Hitachi. So I'll let on.
Yeah, so we did a full business case before we started the project in terms of, what the costs are going to be. And we looked at multiple different costs, right? So there's definitely a cost of the licensing and the implementation and subscription. There's also a cost in terms of upgrading the old software if you were to stay on the old software. And then the costs of what it would take to get some of the modern features like multi-factor authentication and so on with the older software. So that was one part of it. But the other part of it that I mentioned was really around the speed to market. Our company is transforming very fast, very rapidly right now. As I mentioned, we're getting into some new markets. And on an average, we get a request for new application to be integrated once every couple of weeks. So like a new application every couple of weeks. And these applications may not have long life. They're not, ERPs, but cloud applications, people buy them. It's a securities mandatory requirement that they have to integrate with SSO. And we couldn't keep up with that with the old infrastructure. So that was kind of one of the things that went into our deliberation.
This is for Hitachi. You guys said you did a migration in a year, right? And there was 44 applications you guys showed. Is that the total application that you guys did in a year, or like what is the total number of applications that migrated to Okta?
Sorry, I could not get answered.
I could not hear the question really well.
No, what is the total number of applications you guys migrated in a year to Okta?
Yeah. We did 125 applications so far, and there's a pretty big list that we continue to do.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi, that was a question around the buying process. So how much of the architecture did you guys design and plan out before you guys made the purchasing decision to go Okta?
How much did we do before purchasing the product? So it was full POC,
POC, right? So,
So we did do a proof of concept with Hitachi to prove out the technology. Of course, Hitachi was an Oracle Access Stack, so we had to carve out or classify the applications which we're going to move first versus next. So yes, so a lot of design work actually happened during the buying process, but essentially the aim was first to get the cloud applications out of the gate from legacy on-premise infrastructure to Okta, and then the classification of other apps started happening where the legacy WAM structure or WAM infrastructure was supposed to be decommissioned. So it happened over time, but we started in parallel. When Okta applications were getting onboarded, we started right along with it and started phasing out certain applications which were easier to migrate first and then deployed the reverse proxy.
We did a POC for all of our major use cases before purchasing them. So our major use cases were employees, partners, customers, and self-registration. And our EBS, which are kind of ERP platform. So all of that was done before we actually made the decision.
Just a follow-up question. So how long was that POC?
The POC was pretty quick. So I used to sit with Sandeep and it used to happen within a day, right?
I think we finished the POC in a day or less, actually, within a few hours.
Yep.
Once you have the gateway up and running, you can test out the application really, really quickly. It's usually at the application side which needs to be enabled to actually test it out. So if you have the app available, I think the testing part is very easy. And also depends on the app. If it's an Oracle e-business suite app, you need to actually set something up to actually get that single sign-on enabled. But typically it's very quick.
And we took just key patterns, not everything, right? So except EBS, everything went within few hours.
Yes.
EBS setup took few hours, and I think I'll say overall 2 days.
Exactly.
For EBS.
Alrighty. I think we are over time. Thank you so much for attending the session and enjoy Oktane.